awkward.
Okay, we'll start with this. An update on a previous story. It appears that the unified super middleweight champion Frenchon Cruz and what was to be her fight with Alejandra Jimenez, which ended up being a rematch with Marisela Cornejo, that fight with Jimenez, the former WBC heavyweight women's champion, has been postponed and it has been rescheduled for early next year in January on the 11th as the co-main event to Munguia versus O'Sullivan. And as far as what I'm expecting to see, the aesthetic of the fight and the overall outcome, my thoughts really haven't changed much from my initial breakdown. For those interested in that, I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. I think that, for what it's worth, they were right to reschedule this fight. This is a fight worth making. This is a fight worth watching because, in all likelihood, it's going to be a barn burner. It's going to be a shootout. Jimenez is a puncher and Frenchon is a puncher. And neither one of the two is the kind to shy away from the action. So as a co-main event to what is to be Jaime Munguia's maiden voyage to the middleweight division, I think the fans are going to be in for a real treat. I think that, you know, the scalp of Alejandra Jimenez is just about one of the best scalps that anybody at or around 168 can collect, because in that weight class, and I say it all the time, there is a scarcity of top-shelf, top-level talent, top-level fighters. So any top-shelf fighter in that weight class needs to make it a priority to take on those risky fights, take on those risky opponents, because there's just not enough fights to go around, not meaningful ones. And this might be the reason that we're seeing things pick up in the women's super middleweight division. Understand that early next year, on January 10th, we're going to be seeing the WBA champion, Alicia Napoleon, square off against the IBF champion, Napoleon-Cederroos. The following day, that same weekend, we're going to be seeing Frenchon Cruz versus Alejandra Jimenez. And this is what the division needs. It doesn't service anyone, not the fighters, not the fans.
Not anybody.
Not anybody. If these fighters stay away from each other, operating independently of each other. What this division needs is a standout superstar in the absence of what was Clarissa Shields. Clarissa Shields, who has since moved down to middleweight and unified all the titles in the middleweight division, and subsequently means to move down again in her very next fight to pick up a title in the junior middleweight division. What these fighters need to be doing is fighting each other so that they can make a name for themselves.
Put on a show.
There really is no other way to go about it. Regardless of who wins the unification match between Alicia Napoleon and Napoleon-Cederroos, the winner of that fight, by all rights, should move on from that to challenge Frenchon Cruz for what are her two
World titles,
provided that she can hang on to them long enough to do so, you know? Be in a unification match. Who really knows? I mean, I am picking Frenchon to win the fight, but this is the sport of boxing, folks. Anything, just about anything, can happen. I have to say that outside of Clarissa Shields, you know, with the exception of Clarissa, who Frenchon faced in what was her very first professional fight, with the exception of Clarissa, Alejandra Jimenez might actually be the stiffest opponent Frenchon Cruz has faced as a professional, outside of Clarissa, you know. Marisela Cornejo, God bless her, Frenchon dominated her both times, in both fights. Whereas with Alejandra, you have an undefeated, sizable, and strong puncher who might be able to take what Frenchon's got, and if she can, who's to say she doesn't mow her down? I mean, it really does have all the makings of a shootout. I am backing Frenchon to win that fight, but like I said, this is the sport of boxing, folks. Anything can happen. And while the super middleweight division is heating up, I wonder to myself, you know, where is Christina Hammer in all of this?
Yeah.
Well, I realize that Christina is the former unified middleweight champion, but she hasn't come back yet.
I miss her.
And the divisions like middleweight and super middleweight, you know, there are fights there. Those divisions really still are open divisions. In spite of there being world champions there, I give Christina Hammer good odds to have competitive fights with either Frenchon Cruz or Alicia Napoleon or Napoleon-Cederroos or Raquel Miller. I mean, you name them, you know? There are lots of fights out there for Christina Hammer, yet since losing to Clarissa Shields, we really haven't seen much of her. She hasn't been back in action ever since. I wonder, you know, when, if at all, is she going to be making her ring return? And don't kid yourself about Christina, okay? Christina Hammer is still a very formidable fighter. Don't kid yourself and don't fool yourself into thinking that because Clarissa dominated her, that everybody's gonna go in there and have that same success. One, everybody ain't Clarissa Shields. And two, Christina Hammer is still one of the most formidable fighters around anywhere at or around the middleweight division. Not everybody's got the kind of head movement, the kind of fast hands and combinations to where they can easily outwork the likes of a Christina Hammer. She's still a very formidable fighter, and I want to see her back in action. I want to see her back in the ring. You know that since Clarissa is moving down to junior middleweight, right? She's going to be fighting for 2 world titles in the junior middleweight division. That means that the middleweight versions of those titles, in all likelihood, will go vacant, and they will be there for the taking. So I'm thinking, you know, is Christina going to make a world title run in the middleweight division? Are we going to see her move up to the super middleweight division? I mean, what's going on? What's on the itinerary? You know, the sport of women's boxing needs good ambassadors, the kind of faces that can help grow the sport. And this responsibility, it can't just be placed on the shoulders of any 1 or 2 fighters that are out there. It can't all be on Clarissa, and it can't all be on Katie, you know. A fighter like Christina Hammer can help grow the sport because she's not just a skilled boxer. She's got a fresh face that a lot of people happen to like, and that brings in that interest from guys who otherwise wouldn't know nothing about the sport. So I am curious to see when is Christina Hammer going to be returning to action, because things are heating up in the super middleweight division, and the middleweight division is about to be an open division. Clarissa stays down there at 154, then 160 is open for the taking. Will Christina Hammer come back and take it? That's the question. For now, keep your eyes peeled for Alicia Napoleon versus Napoleon-Cederroos on January the 10th, and Frenchon Cruz versus Alejandra Jimenez on January 11th, featuring on the undercard of Munguia versus Spike O'Sullivan.
Promoter Bob Arum says he wants to make a fight between you and Shawn Porter. Both you and Porter have said it's going to be about us. We're going to decide if we make that fight. Have you had a chance to talk to Shawn in the last week, and where does that stand?
No, not at all. You know, like I said, that's not a fight that I'm focused on right now or even worried about. You know, I'm focused on other things right now.
You're not interested in a Porter fight?
Well, you know, if we had to fight, you know, and if it made sense, then that would be a fight that we both would agree upon. But I feel like right now, you know, that's not something that we should discuss right now, because it's nothing on the table for me.
Another fight that's been talked about for you is Patrick Teixeira just won a piece of the 154-pound title. That would involve you moving up another weight class. Does that interest you?
Well, you know, I haven't heard anything about that, you know, so I can't really, you know, give my take on that. I seen him fight Adames. We watched that fight, you know, at my house in training camp, and he looks, you know what I mean, all right, boxing. And he did everything he had to do to get the job done that night against Carlos.
Is moving up in weight, though, something, do you feel like you're good at 147, 54 might be too big, or how do you feel about that?
Well, you know, like I always said, with my skills, I feel like I can go up in weight if I wanted to, but I'm at 147 right now, and that's the weight that I'm campaigning at, so that's the weight that I'm focused at.
Many people are reacting to this interview with one Terence Crawford, king of all welterweights. A man! Pound-for-pound fighter, legend, father. A hero! The modern-day Achilles in the flesh. A legend! If T'Challa were a real-life human being, his name would be Terence Crawford. That's right! From Omaha, Nebraska. Fucking right. But, you know, many people out there are reacting to this interview conducted by Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated and DAZN. And, you know, there are people out there that don't like Terence Crawford's lack of enthusiasm at what could be a Shawn Porter fight in 2020. This interview is being used to spin a narrative that Terence Crawford doesn't really want those fights with the PBC's stable of guys, because look at the energy he's not exhibiting at a Shawn Porter fight, which Crawford would probably be one of the best fights he could have at this point in the juncture. I'll say that I am a supporter of this fight. I actually am a proponent of what could be Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter in 2020. That is a fight that I would like to see come off, because I think it would give Terence Crawford the opportunity to really put it out there just how good he is and how he's a cut above these guys that the PBC's got. I think that really would be the golden opportunity for him to do that. But for Crawford, there's a conflict of interest. Shawn Porter, Terence Crawford, they're friends. And we know which fight with which PBC guy.
Terence Crawford has his heart set and his sights set on. It's the fight with Errol Spence, but look, here's the thing. In all honesty, the Errol Spence fight isn't likely to be next given the circumstances. No one's actually expecting Errol Spence, having suffered that horrific car crash and miraculously walking away virtually unscathed, at least based on the reports. Under those circumstances, nobody's expecting Errol Spence to have what would be the biggest fight of his career, and the biggest fight, the best fight, in the welterweight division, not under those circumstances. So in all likelihood, at minimum, we're at least 2 fights out from what could be Crawford versus Spence. So for Crawford, the question becomes, what do you do in the mean in-between time? Who do you fight? It's for this reason I think he's mismanaging the situation. It's for this reason I think, you know what, you've got to put that friend shit aside and realize, whether you like it or not, you're in competition with your friend. This is the sport of boxing. And Shawn Porter is a boxer the same way you're a boxer, okay? He's a top 10 welterweight. He's a respectable name, a guy who's not an easy out for anybody, the perfect opportunity for you to put not just the welterweight division on notice, but your detractors, your naysayers, those guys. You don't go around giving them ammunition by taking your foot off the gas when a PBC guy becomes available. According to Kenny Porter, they've got the green light to make the fight. So I say, make the fucking fight. Understand, folks, I'm not telling you that Terence Crawford has got to jump through hoops for anybody. I'm not telling you that he's got to fight Shawn Porter to earn an Errol Spence fight. I'm not a proponent of that school of thought, but what I am saying is, one way or another, the Spence fight ain't next. And if it ain't next, okay, what are you gonna do? Going into 2020, what can Top Rank conjure up for you?
What do they got?
So you see one of these guys is available, you see they're ready, you see they're willing, you see they're able, you see the kind of talk that they're putting out there. The smartest thing for you to do is to reciprocate that enthusiasm, because you don't want 2020 to go the way that 2019 went. You've got to fight, you know, somebody good, somebody that's going to keep you relevant, get you attention, get you out there. Right now, the only guy that fits that mold that you can have a fight with, well, it is your buddy, it is Shawn Porter. So you got to put that stuff aside. There's no two ways about it. You know, you can have a fight with an Igus Kavaliauskas, and you could go as far as having a fight with an Alexander Besputin. You know, you could fight those guys, but it's not going to do for you what that Shawn Porter fight will do for you, because that's what it's about. Top Rank versus the PBC. That will sell the fight, along with what both the fighters are known for, what both fighters are capable of. I mean, it's just a reality that Terence Crawford and his people, they have to deal with. That, you know, you might not want to fight your buddy. You know, you might value your friendship or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, that's the best fight for you going into 2020, because in all likelihood, Spence will not be your next fight. So what are you going to do? I don't like how Terence Crawford is handling this situation, and I don't think he likes being put in this situation. If it were Thurman, if it were Garcia, I think he would be more open to the proposition. But the reality of it is, it's Shawn. Just so happens to be a guy that he's friends with. You know, in life there are hard decisions, but they've got to be made. And Terence Crawford, he has a hard decision before him. But it's up to him to decide what kind of year he has in 2020. Does he want it to be better and more eventful than what took place in 2019? A pay-per-view with Amir Khan that not that many people were interested in. A fight with Igus Kavaliauskas that reminded him it's a dog-eat-dog world and you can't look past anybody. These guys, they're hungry. You know, what kind of 2020 does he want to have? Nobody's getting any younger, okay? Terence is approaching his mid-30s. You want to make things happen, you've got to make them happen now, because time waits for no man or woman. And it's not that I'm a proponent of the preludes and the formalities and the hoop jumping. That's not what this is. You know, it's not about Crawford's got to earn a Spence fight. No, it's just that what else is going on for you? And what else can be conjured up, offered up, as an alternate, as a substitute? What? Okay, this is about the best bang for your buck fight he could have, and I think he needs to have it. And finally, Kevin Cunningham, the trainer of Erickson Lubin, was ringside at the Charlo versus Harrison rematch, and he's convinced that if his guy Lubin gets a second crack at Jermell Charlo, he'd win the rematch. For those of you that aren't already aware, Jermell Charlo, over a year ago,
in 1 round,
he made short work of Erickson Lubin. Erickson Lubin, who had a bit of a cult following, he had a bit of a buzz going, and he looked like a kid who, you know, he could turn out to be something. He goes in there, he fights Jermell Charlo, he doesn't make it out of the first round. You know, ahead of that fight, I said that, you know, the look of Erickson Lubin, if you conduct an eye test on him, he seems to have a lot of tools. He seems to have it all together. But the reality of it is, he hadn't actually fought anyone
the world level.
all world level, world class, that convinced me he was ready for Jermell Charlo. So I went with Jermell Charlo to win that fight in any fashion, and as it turns out, Erickson didn't make it out of the first round, okay? Jermell got him out of there, and he got him out of there fast, with a shot that Erickson never saw coming. So, ahead of what could be a rematch, that proposition, we've got to look at what Erickson Lubin has been doing and assess whether or not he's shown enough improvement that you would pick him to win a rematch. And I dare say that, in the 4 fights that Lubin has had since losing to Jermell, I don't see what he's done that puts him head and shoulders above Jermell to where he's a lock to win the fight. Oh, I understand that Jermell looked very vulnerable in there against Tony Harrison in both fights. But Tony Harrison does have a stylistic advantage that Erickson doesn't have. Tony Harrison is a pure boxer. I can't stress that enough. For a boxer-puncher like Jermell, that's a very bad style matchup. Whereas with Erickson Lubin, it would be boxer-puncher versus boxer-puncher, with one boxer-puncher being more experienced than the other. That boxer-puncher being Jermell Charlo. You look on Erickson Lubin's resume, and the most world-level opponents you're going to find in there are very past it Ishe Smith, a Jorge Cota, who never accomplished very much, and Nathaniel Gilmore. And it's not that those are bad names so much as that beating them doesn't communicate that he's ready. That beating those guys don't communicate to me that you could put Erickson in there with Jermell for a second time and he'd be a lock to win. Not a single one of those names communicate that, okay?
They don't.
You want to prove that Erickson Lubin is ready for the world scene. He's world class, and that's the kind of fighter he is. You want to prove that, you put him in there with a Brian Castaño. That's right, the Argentinian kid that fought Erislandy Lara. Tough kid, good puncher, didn't look half bad out there. I'm of the opinion that it's going to take those kinds of fights, that iron, sharpening that iron, to really prove that Erickson Lubin has improved, that he's a better fighter than he was over a year ago when he fought Jermell, and that he's ready to challenge one of these champions, whether it's Jermell Charlo or Julian Williams. What about that fight? I'd like to see that fight. Erickson Lubin versus Julian Williams. That has all the makings of what could be a sensational fight. But I'll tell you that the premise for orchestrating a rematch between Erickson and Jermell, it can't be how Tony Harrison made Jermell look, because Tony Harrison and Erickson Lubin are different fighters. When Tony eats, Erickson don't shit. They got different base styles, those two guys. They go about fighting a fight in different ways. So however good or bad Tony Harrison makes Jermell look, that's no insight into what an Erickson Lubin rematch might look like and how it might play out. So I'm of the opinion that those eggs, they really do need more bacon.